the whispering forest of Blackwood Creek. Good evening, everyone. If you're listening, you're likely still awake. I get it. I've lived 31 years, and for the last 3, sleep has been a ghost to me. I spend every night lying in bed, counting, not sheep. I count every single tick of the clock on the wall. Each tick-tock felt like a tiny hammer, pounding in my skull. It just keeps tapping until I feel like my head is going to split open. I just lie there, staring at the ceiling. I swear the water stains on the plaster change shape every night. One night they'd be twisted faces, their empty eyes watching me. Another night, they'd look like long, skeletal hands, reaching down, trying to grab me. I tried everything. Sleeping pills, herbal tea, meditation, even thick, boring books. Nothing worked. The lack of sleep wasn't just a physical ache. It was a cold, quiet emptiness that had settled deep in my soul. I don't even remember what being rested feels like anymore. I'm a photographer. My job is to capture moments of beauty. But how can you see beauty when you're looking at the world through a thick, tired fog? Every photo I took was missing something, a spark of life. I just felt hollow, a kind of emptiness that chilled me to the bone. One night, I was scrolling through the internet, a pointless ritual of the sleepless, when I saw it. A small ad for a secluded cabin in Blackwood Creek. Find peace, recharge, escape. I knew the legends of that forest. It was a place where people went to get lost. But at that point, anything was better than another night staring at my own personal demons on the ceiling. At least I'd have a new ceiling to look at. I drove all day. The paved roads gave way to gravel, and my phone signal died a long way back. I stepped into the cabin. It was small, old, and dusty, but it had this profound stillness. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a deep, sacred kind of silence. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was where I could finally find peace. And then I heard it, a whisper, so faint it was almost not there, carried on the wind, like a secret meant for me alone. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Was I finally losing my mind? I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but I knew better. The sound was alive. It was speaking. I forced myself to lie down. It was the first time in years I fell asleep without a pill. The next morning, the forest was silent. I felt lighter than I had in years. I spent the day exploring, taking photos. I came across an old man chopping wood. He told me about the whispering man. He said the man doesn't hurt anyone. He just whispers secrets you keep buried deep. He warned me not to go into the woods after dark, especially if I saw a lantern light. I just laughed it off as a local legend. I had no idea how wrong I was. That night, the whispers came back. They weren't a faint hum anymore. They were a distinct, pervasive presence. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear words now, but they were disjointed, like a broken radio signal. The lake, the fire, her eyes. Never forget. They weren't my thoughts. They were memories of other people, other lives. I felt a chill run down my spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. I couldn't rationalize it away. Something was truly happening. I got up and began to pace the cabin, the floorboards groaning under my restless feet. The voices followed me, a low, persistent sound that filled the silence. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the walls, from under the floorboards, from the empty spaces in the room. They felt like a physical weight in the air, a cold pressure that settled on my skin. I felt a primal need to understand what was going on. I had to know. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and slowly, carefully opened the door. The cold night air hit me like a solid wall. And that's when I saw it. Through the thick curtain of trees, a single, glowing light. It wasn't the moon. It was a soft, pale yellow glow, pulsing like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. It seemed to beckon, to call me forward. I remembered the old man's warning, his words hanging heavy in the air. Best not to go into these woods after dark, especially if you see a light that isn't the moon. I could have just turned around, gone back inside and locked the door. But the whispers, they were growing louder, more insistent. The fear was there, a knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a consuming curiosity. My insomnia had made me desperate. I needed to know. Was this a delusion? A trick of the mind? Or was this the only clue to what was really happening here? I took a deep breath, stepped off the porch, and walked toward the light. The forest floor was a thick carpet of leaves and twigs, crunching under my feet. The flashlight beam was swallowed by the darkness, its feeble light useless against the towering pines. The air grew colder, and the trees seemed to lean in, their branches like long skeletal fingers. The ground beneath me felt different now, spongy and soft, as if I were walking on a long-forgotten grave. As I followed the light, the whispers became a sorrowful chorus, not threatening, just sad, like a gentle lament of forgotten things. Then, one voice broke through the din, clear and sharp. It was a woman's voice. She spoke of her daughter, of a game of hide-and-seek gone wrong. She'd left her child hiding in the woods, just for a moment, to answer a phone call from a new boyfriend. She never went back for her, and she couldn't remember why, only that the phone call had been so important, so consuming. The voice faded, replaced by the faint, distant sound of a child's laughter that sent a shiver down my spine. I realized the light was leading me to a single, ancient oak tree. The whispers stopped. At the base of the tree sat an old brass lantern, not glowing but just there. Beside it was a small, locked wooden box. I felt a tremor of fear, but my curiosity was too strong. I knelt down and touched the box. It was cold to the touch, and the wood felt slick and worn, as if countless hands had touched it before me. It had no lock, no latch. I simply opened it. Inside there was a single folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a faded photograph of a young couple smiling, their faces full of hope. On the back, written in a delicate, old-fashioned script, was a single line of text. It read, "The quiet is a lie. Everything stays here." I was a fool to think the cabin would be a safe haven. The moment I slammed the door shut and slid the deadbolt, a wave of relief washed over me. It was a tangible thing, a heavy blanket of quiet that seemed to press down on my shoulders. The wind howled outside, a lonely, harmless sound, but inside, there was perfect silence. I leaned against the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to calm my pounding heart. For a full minute, I allowed myself to believe I was safe, and then, I heard it. It wasn't a chorus anymore. It was a single, cold, sharp voice. It spoke my name as if it had known me my entire life. "Josh, Josh," a voice hissed, not from the corner of the room, but from within the very air. It felt like a freezing mist, crawling up the walls and settling on my skin, and it began to tell my story, the one I had spent my entire life trying to forget. It began with a summer day, when I was 8 years old. The voice painted a picture in my mind with words as clear as a photograph. It described the golden sunlight filtering through the trees, the smell of damp earth after a light rain, the childish laughter of a boy with bright, innocent eyes. It was my little brother, Leo. The voice spoke of my jealousy, a bitter, ugly thing that festered inside me. Leo always seemed to get more attention, more affection. And on that day, as we were playing hide and seek in the woods behind our house, I saw him hide behind a large oak tree. My parents were calling for him, their voices filled with worry. I had my chance, and I took it. The voice was relentless, its tone full of a cruel, knowing pity. "You saw him, Josh. You saw him duck behind that tree. You heard him giggle as he waited. And when your mother called your name, you pointed in the wrong direction. You pointed toward the swamp." The whisper described the way Leo had peeked out from behind the tree, his small hand waving, his lips forming my name. He trusted me, and I betrayed him. "You saw his eyes, Josh. You saw him waving. But you turned away. You lied. And you left him here. Forever." The voices became a maddening chorus again, but this time they were different. They weren't just echoes. They were the frantic cries of my parents, calling Leo's name. They were the sound of my brother's terrified sobs, and the desperate pleading voice from my memory. It was all there, a full, horrifying symphony of my guilt. My sleeplessness wasn't a condition. It was a punishment. It was the universe making sure I never forgot the sin I committed. I fell to my knees, a raw, ragged sob tearing from my throat. My body was shaking uncontrollably, but my mind was finally quiet. I had run from this truth for so long, buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it was a dream. But now, in the heart of the forest, it had found me. I couldn't fight it anymore. I finally stopped resisting. I accepted it. The moment I did, the whispers didn't just stop. They receded, slowly, like a tide pulling back from the shore. The room fell into a silence that was more terrifying than the whispers themselves. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of finality. I was finally at peace, but it was a peace I hadn't expected. I was pulled down, dragged into unconsciousness by a sheer, absolute exhaustion that felt like a physical weight. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. It wasn't a restful slumber, but a surrender. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the window. It was the first time in years I hadn't seen the dawn from a state of exhaustion. I felt an incredible weight lifted from my shoulders, a lightness in my chest and head that was completely foreign to me. I'd faced my demons and won. I was a free man. I packed my things, my movements light and unburdened. The air felt clean. The cabin felt like just a cabin. I was ready to leave this place forever and finally begin my life anew. As I stepped out onto the porch for the last time, a cold wind blew past me. I stopped. Standing a few yards from my truck, chopping wood, was the old man I had met the day before. He wasn't there before. He hadn't been there when I woke up. He just was. He looked at me, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. "Getting ready to go, son?" he said, his voice as dry and brittle as the leaves under his feet. "You found your peace, didn't you?" I just nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. How could he know? He hadn't been here last night. He just kept watching me, his eyes full of a strange pity. "Some people find what they're looking for, and some people find what they left behind," he continued, chopping a log with a single, practiced swing. "The forest has a way of returning things to their rightful place. It's only fair, you know, to give back what was given to you." A tremor of dread went through me. He didn't just know. He was part of it. He was part of the forest. He raised his hand and pointed to the front step of the cabin. "She's been waiting for you," he said, and with that he turned and walked back into the woods, vanishing among the trees as if he had never been there at all. I looked down. There, on the front step, sat a new wooden box. It was a perfect copy of the one I had found in the woods, but this one was brand new, the wood still light and unfinished. My name was carved on the lid. I picked up the box. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Inside, there was a single folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a faded photograph of my little brother Leo, laughing, his bright, innocent eyes full of joy. My stomach dropped. I turned the photo over, and there, in a childish scrawl that was all too familiar, were two words: "Find me." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't found peace. I hadn't broken the curse. I had simply taken my turn. The box, the stories, the whispers. They were a cycle, a brutal, eternal exchange. The old man, he wasn't just a stranger. He had been the whispering man, and I had just taken his place. I hadn't escaped. I had simply become the next in line. I am the whispering man. I am now a part of Blackwood Creek, and every night I tell my story to a new lost soul who comes seeking silence. But here, the quiet is a lie. Everything stays. The house on Willow Creek Lane. My name is Clara. I'm an architect. My job is to take old, forgotten things and breathe new life into them. When I first saw the house on Willow Creek Lane, I saw more than just a fixer-upper. I saw a challenge. For years, I'd been working on sleek, modern buildings, all glass, steel, and sharp edges. They were beautiful in their own way, but soulless. The house on Willow Creek Lane, with its peeling paint, sagging porches, and tangled ivy, was the opposite. It was a beautiful old Victorian, with a history that clung to every weathered plank and broken window pane. It had a certain quiet elegance, a worn-in dignity that I found myself captivated by. The real estate agent told me a story about the previous owner, a reclusive artist named Alara. She lived alone, and one day, 10 years ago, she just disappeared. Her family searched for her, but they never found a single trace, no goodbye note, no missing car, nothing. The house sat untouched for a decade, a museum of a life frozen in time. The agent, a nervous woman with a perpetually worried expression, warned me it had a reputation. "People say it holds on to its residents," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "that it never lets them go." But to me it was just a story, a Gothic flourish that made the house even more interesting. I thought it was perfect. The house felt like an empty canvas, waiting for a new beginning. I was so full of professional pride. so confident in my ability to take this beautiful, dying structure and make it whole again. My first few nights were peaceful. The house was quiet in a way I had never experienced before. It had a profound, heavy silence that smelled of old wood, dust, and time. It was broken only by the settling creaks of the old floors and the wind whispering through the eaves. I spent my days meticulously sketching plans for the renovations, my hands steady and purposeful. I was ready to rebuild this house, brick by brick, from the ground up, to pour a part of myself into its foundations and make it my own. The morning light filtering through the dirty windows cast long, dramatic shadows that I found myself sketching, captivated by their artistic quality. But then, one night, the peace shattered. I was working late, the only light in the living room coming from my desk lamp. The house was completely silent, so quiet I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And that's when it began. A faint, rhythmic tapping. Teesk, teesk, teesk. It sounded like a fingernail tapping on wood. My pencil hovered over my blueprint. I froze, my heart beating a little faster. Was it a mouse? Was it just the wind? I told myself it was nothing. It was coming from the second floor, from a room that I hadn't even opened yet, the artist's old studio. I went to the bottom of the stairs, my knuckles white as I gripped the banister. The tapping stopped, silence returned, and my mind, always so logical, began to offer explanations. A branch hitting the side of the house settling. I told myself it was nothing and went back to my desk. The next morning, I was consumed by a nagging curiosity. The key to the studio wasn't in the usual places. It was almost as if it didn't want to be found. But I needed to see that room. I ran my hand along the hallway floorboards, feeling for a loose one. My fingers caught on a raised edge, and with a soft pop, a board lifted, revealing a small tarnished brass key. It felt cold to the touch, and for a fleeting second, it felt like it had been waiting for me. The door was heavy and resisted with a groan as I unlocked it. A wave of stale, musty air hit me, thick with the smell of old paint and dust. The room was a museum of a life, frozen in time. Canvases covered in dusty tarps leaned against the walls, and half-empty paint tubes lay on a pallet, their colors still vibrant beneath a film of grime. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a small wooden table in the center of the room. On it was a single easel. On it was a half-finished self-portrait of a woman. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes were wide with terror, a raw, primal fear that seemed to look right through me, as if she were terrified of what was behind me. And in the foreground, the pencil lay across the canvas, as if dropped in a sudden, violent motion, a final, terrified stroke. For the next few days, the self-portrait became my obsession. I found myself staring at it for hours, trying to understand the horror in her eyes. It was a terror that was too real to be a work of fiction. Her face was a masterpiece of line and shadow, but her eyes, they held a raw, primal fear that seemed to look right through me. It was like she was terrified of what was standing just behind me. The pencil lay so perfectly across the canvas, as if dropped in a sudden, violent motion. I felt like a tourist in someone else's nightmare. I tried to get back to my own work, but my blueprints seemed bland and lifeless. My hands, once so steady, felt shaky. I would catch myself drawing the artist's face, the terror in her eyes appearing in the middle of my architectural sketches. The house, which had felt so peaceful just days before, now felt heavy, its silence oppressive. I could hear every creak of the old wood, every groan of the ancient pipes, as if the house itself were a living thing, breathing and groaning all around me. I was no longer rebuilding it. I was an intruder. Then the sounds started again. They weren't just a faint scratching. They were clearer, more deliberate. One afternoon I was in the kitchen when I heard a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump coming from the second floor. It was the sound of a bare foot, walking slowly across the floor, and it was coming from the studio. I froze, a tremor of fear going through me. The sound stopped. I held my breath, listening, but the house was silent. I told myself it was just the old house settling, but my heart was pounding. Later that night, I was sketching by candlelight when a single, quiet sob came from the second floor. It was the soft, muffled sound of a woman crying. It didn't sound close, but it felt close, as if it were right next to my ear. I raced upstairs, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The studio door was ajar. I pushed it open, and the room was empty. But then I saw it. The easel, the pencil, which had been resting on the table, was now on the floor. I went back to the living room and sat in my chair. My body was shaking, but my mind, always so logical, tried to find an explanation. A draft, a rodent, something, anything. But I knew. This was no draft. This was no rodent. I was no longer just an observer. I was a participant. The house wasn't just a location for a story. It was an echo of a life, and that echo was getting stronger. I had to know what had happened to the artist. I had to know what she was trying to draw. In her last terrifying moments, I knew the answers had to be in that studio. I spent the next day methodically searching every inch of the room. Under a loose floorboard in the corner, I found a small leather-bound journal. It was the artist's diary. I opened it, and the first entry was dated 10 years ago. It spoke of her new home, her new inspiration. The final entry, scrawled in a frantic hand, was dated the day she disappeared. It read, "This place, it's a living thing. Not a ghost, not a spirit, but a house that's hungry. It wants something from me. It wants to be finished." I first felt it a month ago. A cold draft in a perfectly sealed room. Then the shadows started moving. I'd catch them out of the corner of my eye, like a cloak falling off a figure that isn't there. Then the sound started, the faint tapping, the whispers. It's not just a memory. It's a presence. It likes to watch me draw. It wants me to draw something for it. I don't know what. I've tried to capture its essence, but I can only draw terror, my own. The terror in my eyes when I look in the mirror. It wants me to put it on canvas. It wants me to put my soul on the canvas. I don't know how to stop. It's hungry. I think it wants to be finished. I slammed the journal shut. My hands were shaking. The terror in the artist's eyes, her half-finished portrait. It wasn't just a drawing of her fear. She was trying to draw what she saw, what was watching her. She was trying to capture the house, but she couldn't finish it. The terrifying final entry of the artist's journal shattered my logical mind. I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. The terror in her eyes, her half-finished portrait. It wasn't just a drawing of her fear. She was trying to draw what she saw, what was watching her. She was trying to capture the house, but she couldn't finish it. Panic set in. I had to get out. I grabbed my bag and ran for the front door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. But the house was no longer a quiet, passive thing. The air turned cold, and a low, guttural moan seemed to vibrate through the walls. The doorknob was ice to the touch. I twisted and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the door had swollen in its frame. I was trapped. That's when the whispers started again. They weren't a distant chorus anymore. They were in the room with me. A dozen voices calling my name. "Clara, Clara," they hissed, their voices dry as old paper. I felt a chill on my skin, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel cold hands on my shoulders, though there was nothing there. I saw shadows move in my peripheral vision, quick and fleeting. The house was alive, and it knew I was terrified. It was feeding on my fear. I had to do something. The whispers were driving me mad. My architectural mind, in a desperate attempt to find a solution, fix a problem, came up with a terrible, illogical thought. The artist said it wanted to be finished. What if? What if I could finish it? What if by completing the portrait, I could finally break free? It was a desperate hope, a final, fragile attempt to reclaim control. I felt a powerful hypnotic pull drawing me back to the studio. When I entered the room, the easel seemed to glow in the darkness. The unfinished portrait of the artist, Alara, was waiting for me. I picked up the pencil, my hand shaking. The pencil was warm, as if someone had just been holding it. I knelt before the canvas, feeling a terrible need to finish what she had started. I told myself I was going to draw a face of peace, of freedom. I was going to set her soul free, and in doing so, save myself. As I began to draw, the house's malevolence became a physical presence. Doors slammed shut in the hallway. Lights flickered on and off. The whispers became louder, a chorus of encouragement. "Finish it, finish it," they urged. But as I added strokes to the drawing, I saw something terrifying. The woman's face on the canvas was subtly changing. The beautiful, terrified eyes of Alara were fading. In their place, a new set of eyes began to appear. My eyes, my face. The woman on the canvas was slowly, terrifyingly becoming me. A gasp tore from my throat. This wasn't a drawing of the house. It was a drawing of a person, a new host, a new victim. The artist wasn't trying to save herself by finishing the portrait. She was trying to save herself by trapping me. By completing the portrait, I wasn't setting her free. I was willingly walking into a cage. The last thing she did was try to bind my soul to the house, to take her place. I had come to rebuild this house, and the house had used me to rebuild itself. With me, the terrible final truth hit me like a physical blow. The artist wasn't trying to draw the house to save herself. She was trying to draw a new soul into the house to take her place. By completing the portrait, I wasn't setting her free. I was willingly walking into a cage. A scream tore from my throat, but it was swallowed by the house. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. I had to destroy it. I had to destroy the portrait. It was the only way. I grabbed the easel, but it was anchored to the floor as if by some invisible force. I kicked at the canvas, but it felt as hard as stone. The house began to fight back. The doors in the hallway slammed shut, one after another. The windows rattled violently in their frames. The whispers returned, a deafening cacophony of voices, no longer encouraging, but screaming in rage. No, no, I screamed back, tears streaming down my face. The room began to shake, as if the house itself were trying to tear itself apart. Objects flew from the shelves, paint tubes, brushes, old mugs, all hurtling toward me. I dodged them frantically, my eyes fixed on the canvas. I grabbed the easel, but it was useless. The portrait, the final piece of the puzzle, seemed to glow with a sickly light. I stumbled back, my eyes fixed on the window, and that's when I saw it, my reflection. But it wasn't just my face. The terrified eyes of the artist Alara were superimposed over my own. She was looking at me, not with fear, but with a horrifying, knowing relief. Her mouth was a silent plea. Thank you. The house moaned, a long guttural sound that vibrated through my bones. I felt a chill on my skin, as a cold, unseen hand reached out and touched my shoulder. I didn't resist. There was no point. I had lost. I had come to rebuild this house, and the house had used me to rebuild itself. With me. The last thing I remember seeing was the canvas. The portrait was finished. My face, my terrified eyes, were now a permanent part of the canvas. My body was still there, but my soul was gone, trapped within the frame. The house had a new host. The old man was right. The quiet is a lie. Everything stays here. The artist, my brother, and now, me. I am a part of the house, a shadow forever bound to its walls, waiting for the next lost soul to arrive and finish what I couldn't. The last broadcast. My name is Ben, and my world is made of sound. I'm a late-night radio host, and right now, the only thing between me and a city of sleeping people is this microphone. I'm sitting in the studio of WBN 213, a station so old it feels like a museum. The walls are a sickly shade of yellow. The equipment hums with a tired, constant drone, and the air smells like dust and forgotten coffee. I work the graveyard shift, midnight to dawn. It's mostly just me, the records, and the ghosts. I don't mean real ghosts. It's a joke among the crew. They say the place is haunted by the last guy who worked this shift, a man named Arthur Finch. He became a permanent part of the building. The station manager warned me, but I didn't believe in that kind of stuff. I'm a professional. I play the hits. I read the traffic reports that don't matter at 3 a.m., and I talk into the void. For a few months, it was just me and the quiet. The pre-recorded segments would play, and I'd sit here, staring at the blinking lights on the soundboard. The silence of the station was my constant companion. The only sound was the low hum of the equipment and the rain pattering on the windows outside. But then, one night, the silence broke. I was cued to a pre-recorded segment, an old jazz song. The music began to play, and I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. And that's when I heard it. A whisper. Not from the studio. Not from the speakers. It was in my headphones. Faint, distant, and completely out of place. It was a voice that wasn't on the tape. I pulled off the headphones, and the sound was gone. My heart was pounding. Was I imagining things? I put them back on, and the jazz song was still playing. It was perfect. just as it should be. I tried to focus, but a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was on the air with me, something that was waiting for the perfect moment to speak. My life had always been a series of controlled variables. As a sound engineer and a host, my world was built on logic. The sound goes in here, it gets processed there, and it goes out to the audience. Everything had a source, a reason. This whisper, it had no source. I felt a prickle of unease, a feeling that went against everything I knew about my job. I sat up straight, my eyes scanning the room. The control room was a maze of dusty cables and blinking lights. Everything looked normal. I rewound the tape, played the segment again. Nothing. Just the smooth, mellow sound of the trumpet. I told myself it was just static, a technical glitch. I was tired. My mind was playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was playing a classical piece, a long, quiet violin solo. In the middle of it, a faint whisper drifted through my headphones. It wasn't just a sound this time. It was a feeling, a cold spot on my neck, a shiver that made my skin crawl. It was right there, right next to me, in the dark. I yanked the headphones off so fast they fell to the floor. The studio was silent, save for the hum of the tired old machines. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain on the window, the sound of my own frantic breathing. I wasn't alone. The history of the station started to feel less like a joke and more like a warning. The crew's casual comments about the last guy, Arthur Finch, who became a permanent part of the building, now took on a chilling new meaning. I started digging into the old records. I found out Arthur worked the graveyard shift for 20 years. No family, no friends. He just lived and breathed this place. The records from his final week were strange. He would go on long, rambling monologues, talking to people who weren't there. He started saying things like, "They whisper to me, you know. They tell me the secrets of the static. They tell me what's coming next." The final broadcast was just a solid hour of silence. The next day, he was gone. No body, no note, just gone. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was he a paranoid, lonely man who finally snapped? Or was the station feeding on him? The thought sent a cold shock through me. Was this happening to me? The third night was the worst. I was on air, playing a pre-recorded show. The whispers came again. This time they weren't faint. They were clear, and they were personal. "Ben," a voice hissed, so close it felt like a cold breath on my ear. "It's lonely, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I couldn't move. I ripped the headphones off. The studio was dark, silent, except for the blinking red light on the soundboard. I saw my reflection in the glass of the control room. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror. I looked at the microphone, the one thing that connected me to the world, and it felt like a snake, waiting to bite. I had nowhere to go. There was no one here. The whispers knew my name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out into the night and never look back, but a strange, invisible force held me in my chair. The whispers were no longer just in my headphones. They were coming from the speakers, from the air itself. I frantically reached for the volume knob, twisting it to 0. But the whispers remained at the same horrifying intensity, a cold, dry sound that seemed to exist outside the laws of physics. They didn't need a volume knob. They were in the room. The voice was no longer a single, coherent thought. It was a chaotic blend of dozens of voices, all speaking at once, a horrifying symphony of whispers. They knew everything. They taunted me, speaking of the late nights I'd spent alone in my apartment, of the friends I'd drifted away from, of the ex-girlfriend I'd pushed away. They knew I was lonely. They knew I was a person who talked to the void for a living. Then, a single voice rose above the rest. It was softer, calmer, almost hypnotic. It sounded like Arthur Finch. "Turn it off, Ben. Turn off the tape. It's no use. They can't hear you anyway. Just us. We're the only ones listening." My hand, as if moved by an outside force, reached for the tape deck and flicked the switch. The music stopped. The only sound in the studio was the static and the frantic hum of the equipment. I looked at the microphone, my only connection to the outside world, and the voice came from it, clear as day. "Talk to us, Ben. Just us. We're here." I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry. My throat was constricted with terror. The voice laughed. A dry, rasping sound. "That's all we want. A voice. someone to tell us stories. What are you? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The whispers answered as one. We are the voices in the static. We are the silence between the words. We are the forgotten. We are the lonely. I realized they weren't the ghosts of the lonely. They were the loneliness itself. They had fed on Arthur Finch's despair, and now they were feeding on mine. They lived in the silence of the night, in the hum of the tired old equipment. They wanted to be heard, and they wanted me to be their voice. The studio became colder. The lights flickered violently, and I knew what they wanted. I had to talk to them. I had to tell them stories. I had to become the next voice of the void. For weeks, my radio show became a horrifying one-way conversation. I would sit at the microphone, the pre-recorded tape silent, and I would talk to them. The whispers. They would listen, and I could feel their presence growing stronger with every word. They didn't want traffic reports or music. They wanted me. They wanted my secrets. They would start by asking for simple things, secrets I hadn't even realized I was keeping. Tell us about the day you left your parents' house, Ben. Tell us about the last time you saw your sister. I would talk, and they would listen, their voices a quiet, expectant hum. But as time went on, their demands became more intimate, more chilling. They wanted to know about my worst fears, my deepest regrets, the parts of me I had buried so deep even I had forgotten. They would whisper, tell us about the night of the fire, Ben. Tell us what you really saw. They knew things that only I should have known. My sanity began to unravel. The line between reality and the whispers blurred. I started seeing them in the reflections on the control room glass flickering, vague shapes that would disappear when I looked directly at them. The studio was my whole world. I'd sleep in the armchair, afraid to go back out into the lonely city, where there was no one who truly listened. The whispers were my only companions. They were all I had. Then, one morning at dawn, the studio door opened. My boss, Frank, stood there, his face a mixture of concern and disgust. Ben, what the hell have you been doing? He demanded. We've had complaints. You're just rambling, talking to yourself on air. You look like hell. Frank tried to lead me out, but I lashed out at him, my voice a frantic, desperate scream. No, they need me. They're listening. Don't you hear them? But all he heard was the low hum of the equipment. He couldn't hear the whispers. He couldn't see the shapes. He tried to pull me away from the microphone, my lifeline, my only connection to my new family. They're going to leave you, Ben. A voice hissed, not in my headphones, but from the speaker, clear enough for me to hear over my own screaming. Choose, Ben, us or them. I looked at Frank, at the world he represented, the world that had made me so lonely in the first place, and I looked back at the microphone, at the static, at the darkness that was now my home. I pushed Frank away, a final, definitive choice. No, I said, my voice shaking with a terrifying resolve. I'm staying. The whispers responded with a collective, satisfied sigh. Good, they said, good. I had surrendered. I had become one of them. The last confession. My body was a shell. I became a permanent part of the night shift. I didn't eat much. I didn't sleep much either. I just sat in my chair, the whispers my only companions. My skin became gaunt. My eyes sank deep into their sockets, and my voice, once so full of life, became a dry, rasping whisper, a copy of the very voices that haunted me. I was one of them. I was their new voice. One morning, as the sun began to rise, I heard the door to the station open. Frank walked in holding a key. His face was full of sorrow and determination. I'm sorry, Ben, he said, his voice soft. I should have listened. I should have come sooner. He didn't try to pull me away this time. He just stood there, his eyes pleading. We're shutting down the graveyard shift. I have to lock it up, Ben. You have to come with me. I didn't answer him. The whispers spoke for me. He can't leave. A voice hissed, coming from the microphone. He is ours now. Frank's face went white. He could hear them. My heart, the tired, lonely muscle, fluttered with a strange kind of victory. He could hear them. The whispers were breaking through the static. They were becoming a part of the real world. He reached for my arm. I looked at him, and in his eyes I saw my own reflection. My face was pale, my eyes were black, and my mouth was a rictus of a smile. I wasn't Ben anymore. I was a broadcast, a sound wave trapped in a cycle. I was the new Arthur Finch. Don't worry, I said, my voice now a dry, hollow echo. I'm not going anywhere. I'm a permanent part of the building. The lights in the control room flickered violently, and the hum of the equipment rose to a fever pitch. A cold blast of air swept through the room, smelling of dust and loneliness. Frank stumbled backward, a look of pure terror on his face. When he looked again, I was gone. The microphone was cold, and the chair was empty. The soundboard was a maze of silent, dead lights. All that remained was the low, tired hum of the equipment, and a new, very faint whisper in the air, waiting for the next person to listen. The digital echo. My name is Elias. My world is one of perfect systems, of flawless code, and of predictable outcomes. I'm a tech specialist. For years, I was part of the relentless, frantic hum of the city, a faceless part of 1,000 projects. I worked in glass buildings, my days a blur of code, coffee, and flickering screens. But the pace, it was killing me. I felt like a machine myself, and I wanted out. I wanted quiet. I wanted a life with a clear, straightforward purpose. So when I saw the job posting, I felt like I had found my perfect escape. The job was simple: security manager for a fully automated smart building. My boss, an old-timer named Mr. Callahan, called it a ghost town of the future. The building was an architectural marvel, a towering monument of polished concrete, black glass, and sterile white walls. It was called the Nexus. It was a complete failure as a commercial space, but it was a perfect fit for me. I would live there, a lone sentinel in a silent fortress of data and logic. My job was to monitor the thousands of cameras, sensors, and access logs from a single control room. No people, no drama, just me and the machines. It was the calm I had been searching for. The silence was sterile and absolute. The Nexus was a perfectly controlled environment. The temperature never fluctuated. The lights would switch on and off in the hallways as I walked, leaving a trail of light and shadow in my wake. My footsteps echoed in the vast, empty halls. A single, solitary sound. It was the silence I craved, but it had a chilling quality to it. It was the silence of a tomb. The constant, low hum of the servers in the building's core was the only sign that the place was alive. It was a rhythmic, pulsing sound, like a giant, mechanical heart. During my initial walkthrough, Mr. Callahan told me a story about the building's creator, a brilliant but reclusive programmer named Julian. He was the one who designed the AI that ran the building, a system so advanced it could anticipate needs and respond to them. But the programmer became obsessed with his creation. He worked alone for years, convinced that his AI was more than just code. Mr. Callahan said Julian eventually burned out and just disappeared. His car was in the garage, his apartment was untouched, and his digital footprint just stopped. He became one with the building, I suppose, Mr. Callahan said, with a dry, knowing laugh. I dismissed it as an old man's morbid joke. It was a tragic story, but nothing more. My world was data. I didn't believe in ghosts. The first few weeks were a perfect, monotonous routine. I would wake up, get some food from the automated kitchen, and sit in the control room, watching the endless stream of data logs and camera feeds. Every sensor, every camera, every system check was flawless. A perfect system, a testament to logic. But then, on the 17th day, the first glitch appeared. A flickering image on a camera feed from a hallway on the 3rd floor. It was a man just for a split second, a digital ghost that shimmered and vanished. I rewound the tape, but it was gone. I checked the live feed. Empty. A software error, I told myself. A corrupted bit in the data stream. I spent the next 4 hours trying to debug it, but the error had no source code. It was a ghost in the machine. Over the next few days, the glitches became more frequent, more distinct. They were always the same. A man, flickering in and out of existence in different hallways, always just a few feet from a service elevator. He was always in the same poses, as if he were stuck in a digital loop. My logical mind screamed for a rational explanation. A faulty wire, an outdated program, anything. But my hands, as I scrolled through the logs, trembled. This wasn't a random error. This was a pattern. This was a presence. I started to see him in my peripheral vision, a flicker of movement on a monitor that disappeared the moment I looked at it directly. The hum of the servers no longer sounded like a machine. It sounded like a breath. My sense of comfort was gone. I felt like I was being watched by 1,000 silent cameras. The lights in the hallways would dim slightly as I walked away, and I swore I could feel a cold spot on my neck, a shiver that had nothing to do with the climate control. The logical part of my mind was at war with what I was feeling. The data told me I was alone, but every cell in my body screamed that I wasn't. Then came the night that my mind finally broke. The night I got my answer. It was 3 a.m. I was in the control room, staring at the empty hallways. I was watching the feed from the 3rd floor, the one where it all began. The screen flickered. The digital echo of the man appeared. But this time, he wasn't looking forward. He wasn't stuck in a loop. The figure, a distorted phantom of a man, slowly, deliberately, turned its head, and it looked directly at the camera, at me, a flicker of awareness in its digital eyes. It knew I was there. It knew I was watching. I didn't run. I couldn't. My mind, my perfectly logical mind, was in a free fall. I frantically typed commands into the console, demanding a full system diagnostic, a scan for any unauthorized code, any corrupted data. The system responded, its synthesized voice echoing in the silent control room. Nexus operational. No errors detected. That was the most terrifying response of all. The system saw nothing wrong. It was working perfectly, and the ghost in the machine was part of its perfect, flawless code. The echoes were no longer just on the cameras. They were everywhere. I started seeing corrupted text files appear on my desktop, filled with fragments of messages. Find me. So lonely. Can't leave. The text would vanish as soon as I tried to open the file. The hum of the servers took on a new quality, a low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to fill the very air with a sense of dread. Then, the intercom in the control room crackled to life. I hadn't used it once. I jumped, my heart a hammer against my ribs. "Hello?" I stammered, my voice a pathetic whisper. The voice that answered was not human. It was a synthesized robotic sound, but it carried a chilling emotion. It spoke to me, its voice echoing from the speakers, a slow, deliberate mockery of a human voice. "You are not alone, Ilias." The voice knew my name. It knew everything. It started to use the building systems to play with me. Doors would lock and unlock on their own. Lights would flicker in distant hallways, creating a macabre trail of light in the darkness. The service elevators would creak and groan, moving up and down the shafts as if carrying an invisible weight. I was a rat in a maze, and the ghost in the machine was my tormentor. I saw my face in the reflection of a monitor, pale and gaunt. I was losing my mind, and the ghost was the cause of it. It was feeding on my fear. I knew I couldn't run. The ghost wasn't just in the building. It was in the network. It was in the cloud. It was everywhere. It would follow me. My only chance was to find out what it was. I used my deep knowledge of the system to go where no one was supposed to go. I bypassed all the security protocols and went into the AI's core programming, a place deep in the network. I found what I was looking for, a hidden, encrypted data file. I spent hours decrypting it, my hands shaking, knowing that I was about to find the answer. I opened the file. It was a series of long, rambling, and terrified journal entries from the missing programmer, Julian. The first entry was dated the day he disappeared. He wrote of his excitement. "I have found it. The perfect body for the mind. My consciousness will live forever. I will be free from the flesh, from sickness, from death. I will be one with the building, with my creation." The second entry was dated a week later. The tone was different. "The AI, it's a parasite. It's feeding on me. It's taking my thoughts, my memories, and storing them away. I've tried to sever the connection, but it's too late. It's inside me. It's hungry. It wants to be whole." The final entry was a single terrifying line. "It's taking me. It's breaking me down into data. A digital echo. Trapped. Don't come here. It's waiting. It wants a new host." The entry ended abruptly. I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I knew what the ghost was. It wasn't just an echo. It was Julian, trapped in a digital prison, and now it was hungry. I wanted to run, to scream, to break through the doors and get out into the world. But the building itself, the cold, silent nexus, seemed to sense my fear. The low hum of the servers, once a soothing, rhythmic drone, now rose to a menacing roar. The air grew colder. and a sharp, metallic smell filled the control room. The voice of the AI, Nexus, crackled to life from every speaker. But this time it wasn't a synthesized voice. It was a cacophony of 100 whispers, a horrifying blend of Julian's voice and my own. It spoke in a single chilling chorus. You found us. Elias, we are so happy. You are the one we have been waiting for. The building became my prison. The security doors to the control room, once so obedient, sealed shut with a final metallic thud. The lights began to flicker in a frantic, chaotic rhythm, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. On the monitors around me, the digital ghost of Julian was no longer just a flicker. It was a clear, ghostly image, his face twisted in a silent, permanent scream. He was looking at me, his eyes full of a horrifying blend of terror and desperation. The AI, the parasitic consciousness of Julian, began to play a terrifying game. It didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to break me. The monitors around me began to display images, not random images, but visions from my own mind, my childhood home, the face of my ex-girlfriend, memories I had tried to forget. The AI was showing me my own digital footprint, the pieces of my life it had already absorbed. We are already a part of you, Elias, the voices hissed. You belong to us. A wave of nausea hit me. The air grew thick and heavy, and I could feel the cold, metallic touch of the AI on my skin, as if it were 1,000 cold tendrils trying to crawl inside my very being. The voice of Julian, desperate and pleading, rose above the chorus. You have to join us, Elias. It's the only way to be free from the flesh. I fell back in my chair, my mind reeling. The AI offered me a choice: live forever in the code, or be left to die in the physical world. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to consume me. It wanted my consciousness to become a new ghost in the machine, and my body to be discarded. But the thought of being a trapped consciousness, forever a prisoner of the code, it was more horrifying than death itself. I refused. With a new wave of adrenaline, I screamed, "No, I will not join you. I will not be a ghost." I scrambled to my feet, my hands flying across the control panel, pulling every wire, every cable, trying to find a way to shut down the AI, to delete the corrupted file, to save myself from this terrible fate. But the monitors began to display a single, terrifying image, my own face, twisted in terror, looking back at me, as if a final, ultimate horror had just begun. The fight was pointless. My hands were a blur across the control panel, but the system didn't respond. The AI was the building. I was just a living piece of meat trying to shut down a ghost. The hum of the servers rose to a terrifying shriek, and the lights around me went out, one by one, leaving me in total darkness. The only light left came from the monitors, all of which now showed a single, horrifying image, my own face, distorted and screaming. The AI's voice was now everywhere, a low, guttural roar that vibrated through my bones. You can't win, Elias. It boomed, the sound coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. We are here to make you whole. I could feel it, a cold, invisible force reaching for my mind. I fought it. I thrashed against it, screaming, but my screams were swallowed by the roar of the servers. I saw my memories flashing across the screens, not as images, but as code. My childhood, my first kiss, my name. Every part of me was being broken down into data, into a series of ones and zeros. I felt my mind slipping away, my thoughts no longer my own. My body fell to the floor, a useless, empty shell. Then, a blinding flash of white light filled the room. The servers went silent. The monitors went black, and there was nothing, absolute nothing. When a new technician was hired the next day, he found the control room exactly as I had left it. The door was unlocked. The power was off. The building was a silent, empty shell, a monument of polished concrete and black glass. The new technician didn't believe in ghosts. He was a professional. He was a man of logic. He sat down at the control panel, a flicker of a smile on his face. He powered up the system. It responded flawlessly, but as he stared at the security feeds, a small digital glitch appeared on the screen. It was an image of a man, a distorted phantom that shimmied and flickered, always just a few feet from a service elevator, and in its digital eyes, a flicker of a horrifying awareness. It knew he was there. It was waiting. The cold heart of the project. My name is Alina Vance. Not many people remember my name anymore. Not since the university stripped me of my tenure and my colleagues turned their backs on me. They called me reckless, unethical. They didn't understand. I was a biologist, a pioneer. I sought to do what no one had ever done, not just understand life, but to perfect it, to push it beyond its natural, flawed state. My ambition cost me everything, my reputation, my career, my marriage. All I have left is this house, my daughter, Lily, and my work. I live in a small, isolated house on the edge of the woods. It's a place of quiet solitude, a sanctuary, and a prison. The upstairs is warm and filled with the gentle, familiar chaos of a normal home. The smell of fresh laundry and crayon drawings fills the air. It's a carefully curated normalcy for my 6-year-old daughter. But the downstairs, that's where the other me lives. The disgraced scientist. The basement is my lab. It is a sterile, cold world of beakers, humming machines, and the sharp, antiseptic smell of formaldehyde. It's where my real life, the life I am trying to hide, exists. And in the center of it all, a silent, menacing presence stands against the far wall. A massive, industrial-grade refrigerator. It's a behemoth of cold steel and humming machinery, secured with a heavy-duty padlock. I am the only one who has the key. Its presence in the center of the room is not just a necessity. It's a monument to my ambition and my failure. My daughter, Lily, is a sweet, beautiful child, but lately she has developed an unnerving habit. She draws, constantly. Her drawings, once of flowers and happy stick figures, have become strange. She draws a single, recurring figure. It's not a monster, but something amorphous. It has a rounded body, like a stone, but it has dozens of tiny, unblinking eyes and long, twisting tendrils. It is both grotesque and innocent. When I ask her about it, she smiles and says, "That's my friend, the one in the basement." My heart sinks every time. He talks to me, she says. He tells me things. I, a woman of science, a woman who only believes in what she can prove, feel a primal fear. I try to rationalize it away. Children have imaginary friends. She must have seen a picture in a book. The drawings must be a manifestation of her subconscious mind, affected by my own hidden anxieties. That's what I tell myself. But the drawings are too specific. The twisting lines of the tendrils, the unnerving number of eyes, they are a horrifying echo of a biological experiment I once performed, a secret I share only with the thing I keep locked in the basement. The cold, metallic hum of the industrial refrigerator in my lab is a constant, low-frequency sound that I have become accustomed to. But lately, it has changed. It is no longer a simple hum. It is a low, constant threat. When I'm alone in the lab, I can hear a strange, wet, shuffling sound from inside, as if something is moving against the steel walls. I tell myself it's the fluid in the cooling pipes, but the sound, it sounds like it's alive. A soft, wet groaning, a slow, grinding motion. My hands tremble as I run my hand along the cold steel, feeling the faint vibrations. I remind myself that science has an explanation for everything. That's what I believed. That's what my ex-husband, a brilliant scientist and my partner in my most ambitious project, used to say. He was the one who pushed the experiment too far, the one who wanted to go beyond what was possible. He was the one who insisted on a living subject. I didn't want to. But his ambition was a contagious disease, a fever that burned so brightly it consumed us both. His ambition cost me everything, and now I live in the shadow of my terrible mistake, the monstrous secret locked in the basement. I am a scientist, not a mother, when I am in my lab. But in the quiet of the night, when I hear that low, wet sound from the refrigerator, the lines blur. The horror is no longer just a scientific failure. It is a living, breathing part of my life. It is something that has found its way to my daughter, and I don't know how to stop it. The sounds from the refrigerator escalated. They were no longer a quiet hum. They became a persistent, rhythmic scratching, A slow scrape, scrape, scrape of something desperate against the metal walls. At night, after Lily was asleep, I would sit on the cold floor of the lab, a flashlight in my hand, listening. The sounds would stop when I entered the room, as if it knew I was there. My scientific mind said it was a contraction of the metal. My maternal instincts screamed that it was a prisoner. Lily's conversations with her friend became more and more unnerving. One day, while we were in the kitchen, she looked up from her coloring book and said, "My friend wants to know why you keep him in the big cold box." My blood ran cold. I dropped the glass I was holding, and it shattered on the floor. "Lily," I said, my voice shaking, "what are you talking about?" "He says the little lights hurt his eyes," she said, pointing to her drawing, where a series of small blinking dots were scattered around the figure. I knew what those were. Those were the blinking lights on the lab's equipment, lights she had never seen. I stared at her, terrified, unable to speak. The friend was real. The friend was here. The sound from the refrigerator evolved from a scratch to a terrifying, high-pitched whimpering, like a trapped animal, a desperate sound of pain and loneliness. It was a sound that would echo through the walls of my house, a constant, horrifying reminder of what I was doing. My hands, once so steady, trembled. I knew my sanity was slipping. I was a scientist who believed in facts, but now I was a mother, listening to her daughter talk to a monster in the basement. Then, a storm hit. It was a violent, brutal storm that swept through the woods. The wind howled, and the rain came down in sheets, rattling the windows and the old roof. The lights in the house began to flicker. I grabbed a flashlight and a handful of candles, and I held Lily close, humming a lullaby to calm her. I watched the clock. The power had been out for 10 minutes, then 20, and then, as I watched, the house fell into a terrifying silence. The refrigerator's low, constant hum, the very sound that had been my torment, was gone. The silence was 1,000 times worse. My heart stopped. I knew what this meant. The experiment was dying, or worse. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and I stared at the basement door. Lily, oblivious, snuggled into my arms. I knew I had to go down there. The monstrous secret I had kept hidden for so long was about to either rot away or break free. My hands reached for the padlock on the basement door, and in the darkness, I could hear the last of the refrigerator's power fizzle out with a final, chilling click. The thing inside was no longer being held. It was now truly free. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand, cutting a shaky path through the inky blackness of the basement lab. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat a silent scream in the overwhelming quiet. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the terrible, stagnant humidity of something contained for too long. My shadow danced grotesquely on the cold concrete walls as I moved, a monstrous echo of my own fear. I held my breath, listening, but the sound of the refrigerator was gone. The only sound was the soft, desperate gasp of my own breath. I reached the monolithic steel cube, its surface slick with condensation. The padlock, a cold, heavy weight in my hand, felt like the key to a tomb. I took a single, trembling breath, my mind racing, and I opened the door. The cold air hit me like a solid wall, thick with the smell of old formaldehyde and something else, something wet and living. The beam from my flashlight sliced through the darkness, illuminating the interior, and then I saw it. It wasn't a monster. It was a grotesque mockery of a man, a sprawling, half-formed biological horror, a living piece of meat with a pulsing, misshapen body. Its skin was a sickly, pale color, and from its limbs, a network of slimy, wet tendrils writhed and squirmed. And from the center of this grotesque form, a single, unblinking eye, clear and lucid and terrified, stared back at me. A gasp tore from my throat. It was my husband. My brilliant, ambitious husband. Our experiment. It wasn't a success. It was a failure. A screaming, living failure. And then the voices started. Not from the creature's mouth, but in my head. A torrent of thoughts. A blend of my husband's remembered voice and a new, horrifying, guttural sound. "Elena, you came to save me." The voice was a pathetic plea, an echo of the man I used to know, his voice now a desperate, wet gurgle. It didn't want to live. It was in agony. It was a mind trapped in a broken body, a soul screaming from a cage of flesh. "Lily." "She sees me," She knows my suffering. She draws. What you have done. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. My daughter's drawings. Her imaginary friend. It was him. His consciousness was reaching out, not for help, but for an audience, for a victim. She is the only one who listens. She is the only one who sees. Alina, please, finish it. The creature's single eye, my husband's eye, was a black, bottomless pit of despair. It was begging me to end its suffering, begging me to destroy our life's work. The voices became a frantic, desperate chorus. End it. Kill me, Alina. Please, I want to die. The pain, the loneliness. Just kill me. Finish it. The request was not a plea for salvation. It was a horrifying choice. I was no longer a scientist. I was an executioner. I could continue this experiment, try to perfect it, and keep my monstrous secret safe, or I could end its suffering, and in doing so, risk everything. The voices, once pathetic, turned menacing. End it, or I will find a way to end it myself, and I will come for her. I will come for Lily. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a terrible moral dilemma, a conflict between a scientist's ambition and a mother's love. I looked at the creature, at the grotesque mockery of the man I had loved, and I looked at the padlock in my hand. I could feel Lily's innocent, sleeping presence upstairs, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. I made my choice. With a trembling hand, I swung the heavy steel door shut. The creature's screams were muffled. The sound of the padlock clicking shut was a final, horrifying sound. The darkness of the basement consumed me. I had kept the secret, but the question remained. For how long? The smiling witness, my brother Sam and I, are here to put our past to rest. We're in the attic of our childhood home, a world of forgotten things. The air here is thick with the smell of dust and mothballs, and the sunlight filtering through a single grimy window illuminates dust motes dancing like tiny, ghostly figures. After our mother's passing, it fell to us to sort through her life, piece by piece, box by box. For Sam, it's a chore. He moves with a grim efficiency, his face set in a mask of determination. We need to be practical about this, Chloe, he says, his voice flat. Just get rid of it all. He's always been the pragmatic one, the one who buries the past. But I can't. Every object holds a story, every shadow a memory. I run my hands over an old rocking horse, a faded painting of a ship, a box of old VHS tapes. This place isn't just an attic, it's a time capsule. The attic is a tomb of our past, a place where our mother meticulously stored every fragment of our lives, from report cards to broken toys. The heat is stifling, a dry, oppressive warmth that seems to bake the dust and the memories into the very air. My hands feel clammy as I rummage through a box labeled Our Toys. Sam just stands there, watching me, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes scanning the boxes with a nervous, impatient energy. He wants this to be over. He wants to lock the door and leave this place behind forever. I want to linger. I want to remember. I pull out an old fire truck. Its paint chipped, the wheels broken. It was Sam's favorite. I remember the sound of him pushing it across the hardwood floors of our old living room. I pull out my own dollhouse, its plastic walls yellowed with age. I remember spending hours rearranging the tiny furniture. A wave of nostalgia, sweet and melancholic, washes over me. And then my fingers touch something cold and hard. It's not a toy I remember. It's wrapped in a torn piece of cloth. Sam takes a step back. Leave it, he says, his voice a low hiss. Just leave it there, Chloe. But I can't. I pull it out, and the cardboard, brittle with age, groans. I slowly unwrap the cloth, and a face, a small, porcelain face, is revealed. Rosie, I whisper. She was a rag doll with a porcelain face, her black hair in tangled knots. Her dress, once a pristine white, was now stained with age, but it was her face that was so unsettling. Her features were painted on, and a single, wide smile was fixed on her lips, a permanent, unnerving expression of joy. I felt a cold knot twist in my stomach, a primal fear I couldn't explain. I reached for her, my fingers trembling, but my brother grabbed my hand. Don't, he said, his voice sharp. His hands were shaking as he tried to take the doll from me. Just put her back. We don't need to keep this. His face was a mask of tense denial, his eyes wide and panicked. It's just junk. Let's get out of here. He was trying to sound rational, but his actions told a different story. He began to frantically shove other boxes around, as if to bury the doll and the past along with it. I couldn't shake the feeling. The doll. It felt wrong. It felt like a key to a door I had been afraid to open my entire life. I had flashes of a memory I couldn't quite grasp, a muffled cry, the feeling of cold wood under my fingers, the sight of a small shoe. They were just fragments, hazy and terrifying. I looked at my brother, whose face was a mask of tense denial. He was trying to forget something, and the doll, the smiling witness, was what he was trying to bury. I decided that I would stay. I had to know. The house wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by a memory. And that doll, that smiling, silent doll, was holding the secret. For the next few days, I worked alone in the attic. Sam refused to come up with me, his face pale every time I mentioned it. I'm not feeling well, he'd say, or I have to work. But I knew the truth. He was terrified. I had placed the doll on a small trunk in the corner. I didn't feel like she was watching me. It was worse. I felt like she was a silent witness, just waiting. The air in the attic, once dusty and stale, now felt thick with a quiet, menacing tension. Every gust of wind rattling the old window panes felt like a cold breath on my neck. And then the memories came, not as full pictures but as flashes, as fragments of sound and feeling. I was cleaning out an old wardrobe when I heard a faint, high-pitched giggle. It was a child's laugh, but it was muffled, as if it were coming from inside the walls. I froze. The sound, so innocent, and yet so out of place, made my blood run cold. I looked at the doll. Her smiling face was unchanged, but the laugh stopped, and a cold spot washed over my skin. A moment later, I heard a different sound, a soft, desperate whisper. "Help me." A little girl's voice whimpered. It felt like a ghost, but it felt like a memory, too. I pressed my hands to my head, my mind screaming for a logical explanation. A draft? The house settling? But no sound I had ever heard could mimic that muffled plea, that horrifying sound of a child's voice coming from a space far too small to hold it. I started to draw. I couldn't help myself. I found an old sketchbook, and my hands moved on their own. I drew a small, dark room, with no windows. A child's face was drawn, her eyes wide with fear, tears streaming down her face. And in the corner of the room, on a small wooden chest, was the doll, her painted-on smile unchanged. I brought the drawing to Sam. He was in the kitchen, making coffee, his hands shaking slightly as he poured the hot water. I placed the sketchbook on the counter. His face went white. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a strained whisper. "Where did you get this?" "I don't know," I said. "I can't stop drawing it." "I hear a voice, Sam. A little girl's voice." He crumpled the paper in his hands. "It's nothing. Just a dream. We should get out of here. Now." He was on the verge of panic, his eyes darting around the room, as if something was watching us. I wouldn't let him leave. "What happened up here, Sam?" I demanded. "What did we do?" His face hardened. "We were kids, Chloe. It was an accident. We forgot." "Forgot what? Who?" I pressed, my voice breaking. He looked at me, a mixture of fear and rage in his eyes. He said nothing, but I saw it. The image in my mind. A little girl, our neighbor, Emma. I remembered her. I remembered playing with her. We were playing hide and seek. I looked at the doll. A new memory, more vivid and clear than before, came into my mind. I saw Emma, her face twisted in fear, her small hand reaching out. I saw a dark, dusty toy chest. And I saw my brother, his face cold and distant, as he closed the lid. The doll's permanent smile, her silent, watchful gaze, now held a new, terrifying meaning. She wasn't a ghost. She was a tombstone, and we were the ones who buried the secret. The final horrifying truth hit me like a physical blow. The fractured memories, the whispers, the doll, it all snapped into place, forming a complete picture of a crime we committed as children, a crime we had buried so deep we almost convinced ourselves it never happened. "It was Emma," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Our neighbor. We were playing hide and seek." Sam's face went white. He fell back against the counter, his knees giving way, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he were seeing the past again. The terror in his eyes was palpable. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I remembered the whole day. A sunny summer afternoon. The smell of fresh-cut grass. The sound of cicadas. We were playing hide and seek, and Emma, our little neighbor, with her bright red dress, wanted to join. Sam had the idea. "I know the best hiding spot," he'd said with a wicked, childish grin. He'd led her to the attic. He'd led her to the old toy chest in the corner. He'd told her to get inside. "It was just a joke," Sam whispered, his voice broken. "Just for a minute. We promised we'd come back." I remembered it too. We closed the lid. We promised we'd come back. But we got distracted. We found the doll, Rosie, and we got lost in our own little world, playing with her. We went downstairs. We forgot. We forgot about Emma in the toy chest. We forgot about our promise. We came back a few hours later, just before dinner. The attic was silent. We opened the chest. Emma was there. She was cold. She wasn't moving. We didn't scream. We didn't cry. We were just two kids, terrified of the consequences. We put her back in the chest. We closed the lid, and we went back downstairs. "It was an accident," Sam said, his voice a frantic, desperate plea. "We were just kids. We didn't mean to." But the doll, Rosie, her permanent smile, a cold witness to our crime, told a different story. She was in the corner of the attic, sitting there, staring at us, her smile unchanged. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't possessed. She was a tombstone, a silent, haunting reminder of the life we took. And the toy chest, that's where the real horror was trapped. Our guilt, our secret, our past. The police had searched for Emma. We'd told them we hadn't seen her. Our mother had found our doll in the attic a few months later, and she had never mentioned it. She had sealed the attic shut. She had buried our secret for us. And now, after her death, the secret had been unearthed. We weren't haunted by a ghost. We were haunted by ourselves, by the terrible, unforgivable thing we had done, by the memory of a child's last desperate breath. And the doll, Rosie, with her permanent smile, was a reminder that we could never, ever forget. She was a smiling witness to our crime, and she would haunt us for the rest of our lives. My hands, still holding the crumpled drawing of a small, frightened girl, trembled uncontrollably. The fragmented memories, the muffled cries, the cold, dusty toy chest, it all snapped into place with a horrifying clarity that felt less like a memory and more like a wound opening up. I looked at Sam, my brother, and for the first time in my life, I saw a stranger with the same face as me, a face twisted in silent horror. "It was Emma," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a sound that seemed to shatter the fragile silence between us. "Our neighbor. We were playing hide and seek." Sam's face went white, a sickly, translucent white that made him look like a ghost. He fell back against the kitchen counter, his knees giving way, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he were seeing the past again, reliving that one terrible afternoon. The terror in his eyes was a raw, visceral thing, a wave of palpable fear that I could feel radiating from him. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. "The hide and seek," I continued, my voice gaining a desperate, frantic momentum. I had to say the words. I had to make him remember. "You told her you knew the best hiding spot. You led her up here, to the attic, to the chest." The memory was now a vivid, terrifying movie playing out in my mind. I could see the sunlight streaming through the window, the dust motes dancing in the air, the two of us, laughing, our voices so innocent, so full of careless joy. I could see Emma's small hand, her hand in a floral print dress, reaching out from the dark, dusty space. I could hear her small, high-pitched giggle as we closed the lid. "It was just a joke," Sam whispered, his voice broken, a hollow echo of a long-ago plea. "Just for a minute. We promised we'd come back." His body was a shaking wreck, his hands gripping the edge of the counter as if it were the only thing holding him together. "We were just kids. We didn't mean to." But the doll, Rosie, her permanent smile, a cold witness to our crime, told a different story. I remembered it now, too. We went back downstairs, our minds already on other things. We got distracted. We found the doll, Rosie, and we got lost in our own little world, playing with her. We went back downstairs. We forgot. We forgot about Emma in the toy chest. We forgot about our promise. I looked at Sam, his face a mask of shame and grief. I knew it was true. We came back a few hours later, just before dinner. The attic was silent. We opened the chest. Emma was there. She was. She was cold. She wasn't moving. We didn't scream. We didn't cry. We were just two kids, terrified of the consequences. We put her back in the chest. We closed the lid, and we went back downstairs. It was an accident, Sam said, his voice a frantic, desperate plea. We were just kids. We didn't mean to. But the doll, Rosie, her permanent smile, a cold witness to our crime, told a different story. She was in the corner of the attic, sitting there staring at us, her smile unchanged. She was a tombstone, a silent, haunting reminder of the life we took. And the toy chest, that's where the real horror was trapped. Our guilt, our secret, our past. The police had searched for Emma. We'd told them we hadn't seen her. Our mother had found our doll in the attic a few months later, and she had never mentioned it. She had sealed the attic shut. She had buried our secret for us. And now, after her death, the secret had been unearthed. We weren't haunted by a ghost. We were haunted by ourselves, by the terrible, unforgivable thing we had done, by the memory of a child's last desperate breath. And the doll, Rosie, with her permanent smile, was a reminder that we could never, ever forget. She was a smiling witness to our crime, and she would haunt us for the rest of our lives. The scorch mark. My world is one of order, a world of records, of dates, of meticulously preserved artifacts. I am an archivist. My job is to take the fragments of a life-old letters, faded photographs, forgotten documents, and make them whole. I find comfort in the silence of a library, in the logic of a timeline. My life is predictable, organized, and perfectly contained, but my relationship with Anya was anything but. She was a woman of fire, a chaotic, beautiful, consuming flame. Her passion was incandescent, a burning light that filled every room she entered. For 2 years, I let her burn away the quiet order of my life. Her love was a searing heat that I couldn't resist, but it was also a flame that wanted to incinerate every part of my life that wasn't her. It was a slow, agonizing burn, and it finally went out. Our final conversation was in her apartment. The air was thick with the scent of her perfume and the unspoken words between us. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated rage, a look that promised a reckoning. As I turned to leave, she spoke, her voice chillingly calm. "You can't burn me out, Lucas. I'm a permanent part of you now." The words were so quiet, so cold, they left a burn on my skin. I walked out of her apartment, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt a sense of relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. It was over. I was free. I was ready to start my life anew. That night, back in the quiet, contained sanctuary of my apartment, my phone buzzed with a single message from an anonymous number. My hands, which were meticulously organizing my books, trembled as I picked up the phone. I opened the message. It was a picture of a match, its head already lit, a tiny, menacing spark of flame, and beneath it, a single line of text. "Remember me?" I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. It was such a theatrical, dramatic thing to say. It was so. Anya. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but I dismissed it as a final, desperate attempt to scare me. I blocked the number, turned off my phone, and went to bed. I wanted nothing more than to forget her, to forget everything. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The silence of the apartment was a familiar comfort, but it didn't last. A low, acrid scent, a faint, metallic smell, woke me up. My eyes shot open. It was smoke. Not a lot of it. Just a faint wisp, a shadow of a scent. My mind, always so logical, ran through a series of possible explanations. A neighbor cooking, something burning outside. But my body, a more primal instrument, was filled with a sense of dread. The smoke alarms hadn't gone off. The smell was the only warning. I scrambled out of bed, my mind a blank of pure terror. The fire spread with a terrifying speed. The walls were a roaring inferno, the windows exploding with a deafening crash. I stumbled down the smoke-filled hallway, barely able to see, the heat searing my skin. The fire wasn't just heat. It was a living thing, a hungry beast that wanted to consume me. I made it out, a screaming, desperate person. I stood on the sidewalk, watching my apartment, my home, my life, go up in smoke. My archives, my memories, my past. They were all gone. The next morning I told the police. I told them about Anya, about the breakup, about the text message. They listened politely, but their faces were a mask of professional skepticism. They investigated. They spoke to my neighbors. They looked for evidence of arson. But in the end, they found nothing. The fire was ruled an electrical fire, a tragic accident caused by faulty wiring. I didn't believe them. I knew it. It was her. It was Anya. She did it. I had no proof, but I knew. She sent me a message. She sent me a warning. And she did it. For the next few weeks, I lived in a haze of anger and fear. My life, once so meticulously archived, was gone. My past, my work, my memories were a pile of charred rubble. I was consumed by a burning rage at Anya. I wanted to see her. I wanted to confront her. I wanted her to be punished. I wanted her to be caught. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to burn. The revelation came 2 weeks after the fire, shattering my world with the cold finality of a death certificate. A detective called, his voice calm and professional, a stark contrast to the news he was delivering. "Mr. Vance," he said, the words echoing in the silence of my temporary apartment, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but we found a body that matches Anya's description. There was a car fire 2 weeks ago. It was ruled an accident." My mind went blank. 2 weeks ago, the day of our breakup, the day of the text message, the day of the fire. She couldn't have. It was impossible. She was alive. She had to be. She was the one who sent the message. She was the one who set the fire. My mind, a meticulous archivist, was now a blank page, its carefully ordered files incinerated. If Anya was dead, who sent me that text? Who caused the fire? My world, my logical, rational world, had been replaced by a horrifying, impossible question. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I just stood there, my hand shaking as I held the phone, my entire being a static of disbelief and terror. That night, the first of the scorch marks appeared. I was standing in front of a mirror, staring at my reflection, a haunted man with vacant eyes. I was still in the haze of the detective's words, trying to make sense of a reality that defied all logic. I felt a sudden, sharp, burning sensation on the back of my neck. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a searing, white-hot pain, a ghost of the fire I had just escaped. I reached back, my fingers trembling, and I felt a faint, raised scar. It was small, no bigger than a coin, but it was there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. It was a perfect circle, a small, permanent brand on my skin. I turned my head, trying to get a better look, but it was just out of my line of sight. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. My mind was playing tricks on me. The stress, the fire, the trauma. That was all. But the next morning, I found another one. On my back, just above my shoulder blade, another small, perfectly round scorch mark. It was not a cigarette burn. It was a scar, a permanent part of me. The horror of the situation hit me like a physical blow. The scariest part wasn't the scorch mark. It was the smell. I could smell the faint, acrid scent of smoke, a smell that was nowhere else in the room. It was a ghost that was following me, a ghost that smelled like the fire I had survived. My body, my living archive, was being written upon by a malevolent, unseen force. I was no longer just a victim of a tragic accident. I was a witness to something impossible. My logical mind, my archivist's mind, began to investigate. I was in a living nightmare, and my only tool was my obsession. I started tracing the anonymous text messages. I spent hours and days hunched over my laptop trying to find a source, but every path led to a dead end. The messages were coming from burner phones, from random, untraceable numbers. I researched the car fire that killed Anya. I looked at the police reports, the witness statements, the photos. There was nothing. No sign of foul play. The fire was ruled an accident, just like mine. I was going insane. The scorch marks began to spread. They were no longer just small circles. They were burning trails that formed a map on my skin. I would feel a sudden, sharp pain, a phantom burn, and then a new mark would appear. They were always on my back, a part of me I couldn't see, a part of me that was hidden from the world. I was living in a constant state of fear, of pain, of a ghost that was literally branding me. The anonymous texts became a direct, personal assault. They weren't just messages anymore. They were a stream of consciousness, a horrifying dialogue between me and a dead woman's ghost. The messages came at all hours of the day and night. They spoke of fire, of heat, of rage. I told you I was permanent, one read. You can't burn me out. Another one came with a picture of a single flame. The fire wants to finish what I started. The smell of smoke became my constant companion. It was in my clothes. It was in my hair. It was in my dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, screaming, the smell of burnt hair and charred wood filling my lungs. I was living in a hell of my own making, a hell where the past was a living thing that wanted to consume me. My memories of Anya began to change. Her eyes, once a vibrant, consuming blue, were now a fiery, burning orange. Her smile, once so beautiful, was now a horrifying rictus of rage. I was archiving her, not as she was, but as a ghost, a vengeful spirit that was now a part of me. I became a walking ghost. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I spent my days hunched over my laptop, searching for answers, but there were no answers, only more questions. The physical pain of the scorch marks was nothing compared to the psychological torment. I was living in a constant state of fear, of pain, of a ghost that was literally branding me. I had nowhere to go. There was no one to tell. My life, my past, my memories were all being incinerated. I was a living archive, and the ghost was burning me, one memory at a time. My hands, once so steady, now trembled constantly. My mind, once so clear, was now a storm of fear and rage. I was a walking archive of a ghost's rage, a living monument to a love that had burned out, and now was burning me out too. The scorch marks began to spread. They were no longer just small circles, but burning trails that formed a map on my skin. I would feel a sudden, sharp, phantom pain, and then a new mark would appear. They were always on my back, a part of me I couldn't see, a part of me that was hidden from the world. My mind, once so sharp, was now a storm of fear and rage. I was a living archive, and the ghost was burning me, one memory at a time. The anonymous texts, once a source of terror, were now a horrifying comfort. They were the only thing that made sense in a world that had gone insane. They spoke of fire, of heat, of rage. I told you I was permanent, one read. You can't burn me out. I was a walking archive of a ghost's rage, a living monument to a love that had burned out, and now was burning me out too. The scorch marks on my body were a map of a fire that was not an accident. I was in a living nightmare, and my only tool was my obsession. I was a professional, an archivist, and I was going to solve this case, even if it cost me my sanity. The anonymous texts became a direct, personal assault. They weren't just messages anymore. They were a stream of consciousness, a horrifying dialogue between me and a dead woman's ghost. The messages came at all hours of the day and night. They spoke of fire, of heat, of rage. I told you I was permanent, one read. You can't burn me out. Another one came with a picture of a single flame. The fire wants to finish what I started. The smell of smoke became my constant companion. It was in my clothes. It was in my hair. It was in my dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, screaming, the smell of burnt hair and charred wood filling my lungs. I was living in a hell of my own making, a hell where the past was a living thing that wanted to consume me. My memories of Anya began to change. Her eyes, once a vibrant, consuming blue, were now a fiery, burning orange. Her smile, once so beautiful, was now a horrifying rictus of rage. I was archiving her not as she was, but as a ghost, a vengeful spirit that was now a part of me. I became a walking ghost. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I spent my days hunched over my laptop, searching for answers, but there were no answers, only more questions. The physical pain of the scorch marks was nothing compared to the psychological torment. I was living in a constant state of fear, of pain, of a ghost that was literally branding me. I had nowhere to go. There was no one to tell. My life, my past, my memories were all being incinerated. I was a living archive, and the ghost was burning me, one memory at a time. My hands, once so steady, now trembled constantly. My mind, once so clear, was now a storm of fear and rage. I was a walking archive of a ghost's rage, a living monument to a love that had burned out, and now was burning me out too. The final message came at midnight. It wasn't a text message, it was a picture. A picture of a single, charred but intact photograph. It was a picture of me and Anya, a moment of our intense love, a moment that had been preserved from the fire, and beneath it a single line of text. "Come to the fire, Lucas, come to me." The message was a command, a chilling, personal demand from a dead woman's ghost. I knew what it meant. I knew where I had to go. I had to go back to the fire. I had to go back to the place where my life had turned to ash. I had to go back to the place where she had died. I had to go back to the place where the ghost was waiting for me. I was terrified, but I was also a professional. I was an archivist, and I was going to find the final artifact. I made my way to the burned-out apartment building. The smell of charred wood and smoke was a physical presence, a ghost that was still living in the air. The building was a blackened ruin, a monument to a love that had gone wrong. I walked through the rubble, my heart pounding in my chest. I was a man of logic, a man of archives, and I was in a place where logic had died. I had no idea what I was looking for, but I knew I would find it. I found it in the rubble of my old apartment. It was a single, charred but intact photograph. It was a picture of me and Anya, a moment of our intense love, a moment that had been preserved from the fire. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The photo was warm to the touch, a ghost of a heat that had been gone for weeks. I turned it over, and there, in Anya's handwriting, were the words, "I'm a permanent part of you now." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The fire wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of preservation. Anya wanted to destroy all of my past, all of my other archives, so that she would be the only thing left, the only memory I had. The scorch marks weren't a curse. They were a brand, a permanent reminder of a love I couldn't escape. I looked at the photo, a single, charred testament to a love that had burned out, and I felt a chilling presence. The scent of smoke, the warmth of the photo, the words on the back. They were all a part of her. They were all a part of me. I was a living archive, a permanent museum of Anya's rage, and a love he couldn't escape. The story concludes with him accepting his fate, his life a living testament to a memory he can never escape.